Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Learning Guild. We have Lars Hyland. He is going to present how to support a hybrid workforce, integrating learning, engagement, and performance management. Lars Hyland is a well-known figure in the HR and learning community who believes adaptable and flexible technology forms the foundation of the new world of work. Lars is an expert in the field of talent experience that brings together learning engagement and performance management practices to drive employee satisfaction and productivity. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Lars. And Lars, when you're ready, please feel free to share your screen.
I will do. Thank you very much for that introduction. So here we go. Everyone okay with that?
Yes, we see your screen.
Excellent. Thanks for confirming, Karen. And thank you everyone for joining me today to talk about supporting a hybrid workforce. This is something I'm sure we're all grappling with, both personally and also in our respective roles and the organizations that we're supporting. And I think there's plenty of issues to discuss. Feel free to use the chat area to share your own situations and predicaments and solutions with each other as we go through. And please do use the chat as Karen indicated. I'm really interested in your questions as we do go through. So what I'm going to be covering is essentially the challenges, the talent challenges that I think we're all facing today, and to really look at how integrating learning, engagement, and performance management together makes a significant difference to the way the workplace experience is supported when we've got remote workers and people anywhere, essentially, whether it be in an office or other type of work environment. So all of those flexibilities are now much more mainstream than they've ever been. So let's take a look at what I think are some of the key talent challenges that are facing us all today. So the first one, attracting and retaining new talent. I think we are all very mindful of what people are calling the Great Resignation. It's still in the news and the media, and it's still having a dramatic effect. I like to think of it as the Great Discontent, really, because a lot of people were perhaps in roles before the pandemic, not necessarily feeling that comfortable, but ploughing ahead in their roles without really having had much time to reflect on the experience they have at work. Being forced to work from home has put that into sharp relief, and for a good number of people that has been a positive experience. For a good number of other people it's been quite stressful in its own right and very challenging, but many people have come through what has been quite a significant length of time, and that reflection period is resulting in significant changes in the job market. So here you're seeing just a few statistics that I've compiled. 4 million people in the US quit in April 2021. That's continuing to happen throughout this year. Microsoft, in their surveying, see 46% of workers globally planning a job move. That's an ongoing effect. We're seeing it here in the UK from where I'm speaking to you from as well, and across the rest of Europe too. 26% of US workers, that's 1 in 4, looking to move and change their role. It's another survey. And then here in the UK, 38% of UK and Ireland workers are really considering a shift. So this is dramatic, and it's very a significant upheaval for organizations of all sorts, not just for the individuals as well, obviously. So there's something really critically at issue here, and it's not just the effect of the pandemic necessarily. It is uncovering, I think, an underlying set of issues with what it's like to be at work and what that culture is. Next to this, we have another challenge, which is we have people at work, and if we are going to retain them, then we need to think carefully about reskilling that existing talent. And the challenge, though, is that skilled workers, or how we define them, that the actual skills that we need to support our our organizations now and in the next decade, those skills are in short supply. There's a high demand for that limited amount of talent that already has those skills. So there's extreme pressure on us to work to reskill and upskill people into these new job roles, which are dramatically changing. Now, this report here from the World Economic Forum, this was from back in October 2020, but it still applies generally that over the next decade, they estimate 1 billion people are going to need reskilling to remain relevant in the workplace. That's a significant job for us all. And as learning professionals, it puts us front and center really into trying to make that transition as effective and as smooth as possible. But it's affecting all of us. It's not just perhaps some of the obvious roles. What we're seeing is technology impacting pretty much every job sector, pretty much every job role. And I've just picked out a few here which are starting to come to the fore, where technology is replacing in some cases, but actually just transforming those roles where we're working alongside smarter technology, and it's affecting all roles. So, for example, the legal profession, there's plenty of legal work that will be automated and become essentially self-service. Interestingly, software development, very hot sector, the tech sector itself, very high rewards to be had there, but already OpenAI with their Codex solution, which essentially can take natural language and in English and turn that into workable, good code, is changing the nature of the type of skills that you need. So logical thinking is still required, but it really transforms the pace at which you can generate workable code, robust code. So that's already impacting that sector where there's a lot of pressure and competition for talent in there. Equally, new job roles that we didn't even know about 10 years ago. For example, role of an influencer, that's become something of a sector in its own right. And already you can get fully AI, virtual, video-driven influencers. So in the space of less than 10 years, the sector has arisen, and then it's likely to be transitioned to be fully automated in that case. So the life cycle of job roles feels like it's shortening. They're going to continue to chop and change and dramatically adjust. So if they're going to change within the next 10 years that dramatically, it will change even faster at the end of this decade as we hit 2030. So with that in mind, we really need to be increasingly good at learning, relearning, being able to adjust our skills portfolio pretty much in an agile, real-time way ultimately, and that requires some fresh new core skills. So one of which I'm sure we're all very au fait with is the need for more digital fluency. So Deloitte put this as two key focuses for HR, the HR community in its own right, that we need to increase digital capabilities in order to help our organizations thrive and the people in our workplace thrive in the digital age that's really coming to the fore, and that the design of our organizations needs to accommodate that. So we need to be able to incorporate more agile and team-based work. And very much coupled with that is the softer skill, if you like, of adaptability. It's quite a broad area, but it really is now a core skill. That means we need to be able to be flexible. We need to be able to be comfortable with change, which in many cases has been extremely stressful for us. I mean, the pandemic itself has really brought that into sharp relief for us. But the ability to build up resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility, easier said than done. But there are examples of the characteristics that we need to be able to see in our people more generally if we're going to be successful as teams surviving in very uncertain climates. But there's a whole range of other skills here that are listed on this slide. This report again picks out 10 key areas. So analytical thinking, being able to learn actively, as I already mentioned, complex problem solving. So quite high level cognitive skills are coming to the fore, plus also the technology side of things, and the ability to really leverage data and the tools around us in smarter ways, more sophisticated ways. And all of that comes around to the main topic of today, which is about hybrid work. You know, what is it? I think we're all working that definition out collectively still, but how do we keep people engaged, and how do we keep people effective in their roles and therefore happy in their roles and staying in their roles, given that the fact that there's a lot of pressure and competition for talent. So here's something I've picked out from the analyst group here in Europe, Fosway Group. They did a survey. Where does your organization expect workers to work in the year ahead? And you can see here that 62% are expecting to work less than 2 days in the office. So that means primarily we're a remote workforce in many organizations going forward. However, we've still got that spread of people who will be more in the office. But it's quite a widespread, as you can see. So our ability to support that type of workforce needs to be flexible. It needs to be much more balanced around not just synchronous face-to-face or even virtual meetings, which can be exclusive rather than inclusive. It needs to be more asynchronous and being able to capture and collaborate in different ways, which I'll come on to in more detail. But essentially, hybrid is going to be here to stay. It's just how we formulate it and the characteristics of, or the balance of that hybrid working for each of our organizations, depending on our own culture and needs. But there are some challenges to that. So it's clear that where there has been a strong center, strong big head office, say, and people are living around that in a city urban environment, then there is a proximity bias that's drawing people back into that office. It may be the leadership that's driving that, which may be a disconnect with what people are feeling, as I already alluded to, which is, again, probably driving the vast numbers of people resigning and looking for fresh places to work that are more inclusive and supportive of remote working from the outset. But that inclusion, that balance of remote and office staff it's hard to balance, and it's really critical to get the right infrastructure in place, the right workflows, the right technology in place to support that seamlessly. Because let's face it, I think a lot of people got it quite wrong. They didn't have the right technology in place. It was fragmented, it's full of friction, there's misuse of tools. So we're using Zoom today. It could be Teams, it could be anything else. But if you're designing a workday to be just a long series of these sorts of calls, that's very, very wearing. And there is some etiquette and there's some grammar around how to use them more effectively, which is not necessarily promoted as widely as it should be. Systems themselves are not integrated or scalable. So plenty of organizations pretty much fell over in the initial stages of the COVID pandemic and had to scramble to get different solutions in place, which in their own right may not have been appropriate for the longer term, given that remote hybrid working is now here to stay. The result of all that is not surprising, really, that surveys have shown that there's been a 17% drop in psychological safety. What I mean by that is people feel more detached from the conversation, more fearful perhaps to contribute and challenge the decision-making processes that they would normally do if they were face-to-face in meetings. However, that dynamic was never perfect anyway. You know, we had plenty of people who were not comfortable in the face-to-face environment being able to contribute actively, have actually found it much easier to do so when it's been managed asynchronously at a distance. So there are, again, nuances to this where we want to be able to personalize and improve the experience for everyone. And that's because expectations are really changing. And I think that's one of the key drivers of why people are looking for fresh challenges and for more freedom. It's quite clear that currently people have had the time to reflect, and that's driven a refocus around what people are really spending their time on. That includes work, it includes their home and other activities that they do, and they want a fresh balance to that, and they want more control over that. So they want to be able to work in an environment that is concentrated on strengths rather than perhaps pointing out weaknesses. In more toxic management climates, that can be a real challenge. So looking for a mentored environment, a coaching environment is much more attractive and actually much more effective at driving and supporting high performance and sustaining that. It's all about learning and development. Well, it's always been about learning and development. We know that as a professional focus on it. But I think the strategic importance of it is coming much more to the fore. And it's important for us as learning professionals to be able to step up and be able to have those conversations and to really help put learning into the performance conversation, the business performance conversations, not just be something that's tacked on at the end, as has too often happened, unfortunately. I'm sure we've been in those situations. And when we do see organizations investing appropriately in the employee experience, or as I like to call it, the talent experience, i.e. when you're at work, what is it like to work there, and am I able to get my job done to the best of my ability? And when there is a real focus on supporting people in that way, and investment is placed in that, and priority is placed there, it makes a difference to the bottom line. As Jacob Morgan here reports, and this is back in 2017, in fact, that companies that do invest, well, the average profit that they yield from those employees is up to, well, times 4. It's 4 times as much. There are benefits across the board in terms of the productivity, the revenue growth, employee growth. So that means retention of talent is all improved when the employee experience is really thought through carefully and thought through holistically. But too often it's not arranged like that. So I'm just going to pause now and just see if there's been any questions. Karen, anything?
There has been. So one of the previous slides, you were talking about adaptability, the core skill, and you list, it's slide 9, the number, not the number, but a number of skills, analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, and so forth. And a question was asked, are those listed in rank order?
I don't think so. No, they're separately stated as there's no real hierarchy to that. It's a collection of skills that, in the round, the ideal, if you like, the ideal shopping basket of skills that a person would have. Now, no one individual person is going to major in one or more of them, right? There'll be some natural sort of focus to maybe more cognitive skills or more technical skills or more communication and collaborative skills. That's the diversity of us as people. So that will be the case. However, we should be mindful of being able to develop and build up those skills, because they'll be much more rising to the surface and to keep us relevant in the future job roles as they change.
Oh, great answer. Thank you. And another question that came up that a number of people are interested in, talking about resilience and stress tolerance and flexibility as being skills that aren't really super easy to train. So what are your thoughts and suggestions on those items?
Well, they are, you're right, you can't just train people on these things. In fact, that probably applies to an awful lot of behavior, particularly sort of behavioral aspects of things. But what you can do is practice them in meaningful ways. And so that means constructing learning experiences that are simulative, perhaps in those cases, but also oriented around real situations that you do need to respond to change and rapid change, but you're doing it in a supported environment. I'll come on to this actually a bit later around how I think the shift we need to make in our learning design decisions as to that brings to the fore the behavioral aspect as much as the sort of harder skills that are more straightforward, you could argue, to present to people and see evidence of them acquiring them.
Well, thanks. That seems to be all the questions for right now.
Thank you very much. Let's go on and let's have a look at some of the things that I feel that we can all do, or I would like to suggest that our audience does, as practical next steps. To look at your organisation, look at your own activities, and see if this can help inform the agenda for change that I think we need to be spearheading. So I'm going to start with a couple of book recommendations. One is called The Exponential Age. It's by Azim Azhar. He's a very, I think, astute and knowledgeable commentator on how the tech industry, or not just tech actually, how technology and economies are responding to change. And I think we can all now agree that as of the past couple of years, this sense of exponential change and unexpected change has become extremely tangible to us. The pandemic is an example of it, but it's not going to be the only one. There's plenty of other influences going forward that are going to transform whole economies, our society, our ways of work, as we've already covered. So I'd recommend you have a read of that, because it talks about how technology is driving change, and yet how our governments and how we as people, as societies, respond to that. And I think there's some nuances there which really help understand how best to position some of these broader skills challenges that we need to address. Second book by Gary Bollas is The Next Rules of Work, and this is a good practical guide, I think, to how HR functions themselves should redesign and reprioritize how they operate, how the workflows and processes should work. So again, that's something I think that's worth a closer look and to share right across your HR, your teams. Bringing it right back to our learning sort of focus, I think it's really important that the learning that we think of learning as a culture, actually we embed learning into work. It is the work. It's something that's intentional right across everything that we ask our people to do in the job roles that they have. And if we are going to support them with learning, with structured learning, with interventions, if you like, or experiences that are designed to effect not just knowledge gain, but actual performance change, behavioral change, then we need to design it to these 5 steps. I'm hoping that a good number of you will recognize that these are good practice steps anyway. But if not, I would suggest you take a closer look, that any design that you have, you set small, clear goals. You remove the distractions. That's tough, especially if you can't control the environment, but you need to think about the environment that people are in. And if you think about a hybrid work environment, that's even more complex, whether it be at home or in office environments going forward. That you design in feedback, and that is not just canned feedback, say in e-learning modules, it's interacting with others, so that there is observation, there's feedback on actual practice, deliberate practice. As is stated here in the 4th step, deliberately practicing those skills in real context is really key. And then there's space and time to reflect regularly, and to do that in a positive way, in a supported way. And that loops back round so that the learning now becomes embodied and becomes part of someone's experience and expertise. So I'd like to think that is prevalent, but it isn't as much as it should be. I think there's still a lot of abstracted just-in-case training that is done, and it may not even be really that aligned to what people are really focused on at that time. So a good amount of that effort is wasted as a result. It doesn't really change into lasting behavioural change or performance in the job. So a good friend of mine, Laurie Niles Hoffman, I think a number of you will know of her. She put this little slide together on another webinar presentation that I did. I thought I'd share it with you here, that it's not just about the content. I think increasingly we understand that it's about context, as I was alluding to before in that intentional learning steps, and that it's about application, it's about real application, and it's about data. So it's about us using data smartly, collecting the right data, being able to respond to activity in ways that steers and changes the learning experience for individually. So it's much more personalized and much more adaptable in its own right. So being able to have the right mix of workflows, processes, designs, and also technology is really critical to delivering that effectively. And I think we're going to see that with, I think we're already seeing it with a good number of job role shifts in L&D and HR roles. And this is something that the LPI capability model points to. So again, I did another session with Josh Burson some time back, and he pointed this out, pulled this out, that there is a shift from thinking of us as instructional designers, building quite formal, pedagogically structured learning curricula, to one that is actually the other way around. We think about the performance and we think about the experience that individuals will be interacting with this. So it needs to be mindful of that, and it's a bit arguably messier, so it needs to be much more flexible and much more designed for consumption in a more uncontrolled environment, say. That way it'll be much more effective and much more useful and usable. Equally, when it comes to instruction, it's not just about classrooms. Clearly, classrooms still are really important, but doing this sort of thing, doing it virtually, doing that effectively. How do we interact and collaborate effectively using tools like this? How do we interact and collaborate asynchronously effectively? How do we nurture the communication skills that we all need to improve on to be able to share and work remotely in different time zones effectively, and sometimes at pace? So there's plenty of change there, I think. Equally, capability, thinking about capability as opposed to just to content and topics. So there are some shifts of mindset that come with these job role titles changes. And as I've alluded to already, technology itself is often a hindrance rather than help. And the environment in which we ask people to work can be full of obstacles. And how do we remove those roadblocks? How do we move from, well, increasing efficiency, but at the same time really focusing on effectiveness? How do we help people be really effective and use their time smartly and build a trusted climate and culture in which people can get their work done smartly and innovatively? Because rote following of standard practice only works for so long. And in fact, that half-life itself is shrinking just as much as the job roles are. Now, again, I picked out a stat here. 38% of organizations, only 38% of organizations think their HR systems are fit for the modern workforce. And so there's a lot of legacy systems that haven't changed anyway, pre-pandemic. Perhaps they should have done before. So there's a lot of pressure now and a lot of more recognition that these systems need to be more modern. They need to be more effective. They need to be more user-friendly. They need to be more integrated so that experience is friction-free. I think probably in your own experiences, you're finding that it's not like that in your own workplaces. It's rare to find a perfect example, but it's certainly the direction of travel that we need to go in. And as learning technology professionals, then we need to think about how that ecosystem of tools ties together so that it is as seamless as possible and as supportive as possible. But one of the big challenges that we're going to have to deal with is our HR functions and how we're set up and how we're structured. Typically, HR functions, especially in larger organizations, will have quite strong silos in their own right. I mean, right across the organizations, there's challenges with a poor sharing of knowledge across departments, whole departments. Well, the HR function in its own right and the way that it supports people can also be very siloed. And that can lead to a workplace experience that's very frustrating and can even be obstructive rather than supportive. Maybe this is a scenario that you'd recognize, which is you're the recipient of multiple notifications, of multiple requests for you to complete training, to respond to surveys, to complete a performance review, to interact with an internal comms campaign that's communicating some new leadership direction. There's an awful lot of things that come into the inbox which can be extremely challenging to respond to in a meaningful way. So wouldn't it be good if that was much more streamlined, aligned, and personalized and timed to be something that would be supportive in the role that you're in, and the jobs that you're doing right now, or the tasks that you're active on, and the goals that you're focused on. One way of rethinking that is that the structure of the organization is changing, and if we all agree that the world out there is changing at a crazy rate, unpredictably, then the way our organization and the way we operate with each other needs to change too. So that shift to a much more open model, which is more bottom up as opposed to the more conventional top down approach, command and control, it's much more appropriate to tap into the talent and experience of people right across the organization, enable free communication right across the organization to be able to respond nimbly and agilely to changing circumstances. I like to think of this a little bit in musical terms. So imagine an organization is either a jazz troupe or a classical a quartet, say, or orchestra, should I say. And there are quite different approaches. Obviously in classical music, as a conductor, you follow the score as closely as you can. There is some interpretation at the edges, but if you start improvising in the middle of a symphony, that's probably frowned upon, as opposed to in a jazz troupe, it's all about fluid, agile, being responsive to the people around you. And if someone spins off into some improvisation, then that's okay. You can adjust accordingly. So there's a balance between the two, clearly, especially as you get larger. But really, you can see that the outside environment is favoring those teams, those organizations that can respond in that fluid way. That's where the resilience and adaptability comes in. Being unfazed by unexpected change and being able to respond positively to it. It requires a lot of trust. So the culture of the organization needs to be built on trust, that psychological safety, and that's about moving to a more, what I call a congruent talent experience. A congruent talent experience is one that is aligned, it's smooth, it's not friction in there, and you're on this virtuous cycle here. It sounds utopian, probably is right now in many organizations. This would not be a common experience, but something we need to work towards. So wouldn't it be good if you do feel part of a cohesive team that works together, and that you do have access to the right resources at the right time to get jobs done, so that performance support is really there and valued, and that you get appropriate feedback at the right time so that it makes a positive difference to the outcomes and the goals that you're working on, and that you know what those goals are, and that you've translated what are company goals into team goals and into individual contributions, and that in that role you have opportunity to access new learning opportunities to upskill and develop beyond that as well. So it's critical that culture, which the managers play a critical role in being able to move to a more coach mentor mentality as opposed to a model where it's about driving performance. It's the wrong type of phraseology, really. So it's about being valued, it's about being listened to, and about getting work done together much more effectively and sustainably. So that's very much why at Totara, we've been thinking very closely about what motivates people at work. And when you look at the research that underpins this, it's interesting, because it's not just about reward, it's not just about paycheck. And we're seeing that, this great resignation, the great discontent is really proving that people are wanting change, and they're driven by different things. And those things are mastery, autonomy, and purpose. You might recognize those from Dan Pink's book, Drive, actually, it's called. It's about 11 years old now, I think, but it's never been more, I think, relevant. It's right now that these things need to be put to the front of our design thinking and our HR organizational design priorities, really. Mastery is another way of the skills, addressing the skills chasm, the skills challenges that we have. Giving people the autonomy, i.e. the psychological safety, the space, the time to reflect, to get things done in more innovative ways, working with others. And that we're all very, very clear about what the organization is about and how that aligns with our own values. And that therefore, all of those three things working together are tremendously motivating. Another way of looking at it is that it's like three legs of a stool. If one of those legs are missing, if you're missing, if you have a toxic culture, although you've got plenty of opportunity to develop your skills and you are clear about the purpose of the organization, well, ultimately it's not sustainable. It will still fall over. That stool will fall. So you need to think about all three of these elements, and that's why bringing them together makes a tremendous difference. Here's an example, and I think this is a phrase that some of you will be familiar with, action learning. It's another way of talking about an intentional learning culture, one which is rooting the learning in getting work done, real work done. And I've just laid this out here. So really, we want to be able to coach and guide people to meet business goals. So that means people have to understand them. There needs to be clarity. There needs to be a cascade into actual behaviors and getting work done in accordance to those goals. And that there's a clear focus, and that the environment in which they're working in allows for that focus. That we bring people together, and that we get work done in groups and in a collaborative sense, where we learn from others as much as we learn from materials and resources that we supply. So they work together. So the concept of action learning sets, I'm sure, is familiar to you. Being able to facilitate that much more readily and to make that almost the dominant way in which learning is built into the work experience makes a tremendous difference. And that the more formal programs of learning and certification and assessment, that's all still very, very, very important, but it backs that up. It brings people up to common standards and gives everyone the confidence that people have the right competencies and skills and proven skills to flexibly meet new challenges as they arise. So that bringing together is something that I feel is increasingly important. And to facilitate that at Totara, that's what we have done, is bring all of those three elements, which are typically separate, not communicating that effectively with each other, and to place them onto one single integrated platform. So being able to manage all of your learning in one place, being able to manage your performance management, the continuous feedback models, as well as the more detailed, perhaps, annual reviews or periodic reviews, all of those things need to be accommodated together and in tune with the learning support, and also in tune with the engagement and collaborative work that you do together. So being able to bring all of those three things is quite transformative if implemented well. So we've seen this being used across many organizations. Totara is I think well known now across many sectors. We're a global organization with many customers using our learning management facilities and also performance management and engagement. And it's starting to see significant effects. So here's just a few examples. Shimano, anyone who rides a bike will know about Shimano, no doubt. They provide parts for bikes, and they reach out to all of their resellers around the world and they certify them, and they use Totara to do that. And you can see there that it's themed and branded very, very closely to their needs. There's a lot of flexibility there. Another example, 500,000 users around the world, Western Union, integrate their platform right into the workflow of their people by integrating it right into their EPOS system. So that's a good example of putting learning right into the flow. This is mandatory regulatory types of training. So the interfaces, the UX of it is really streamlined right down to what's needed. Another a sign of flexibility. And then just some other examples there of how Totara itself is used in different areas. So I would love to take some more questions. Karen, have there been any more?
Yeah, there was a very interesting question that a number of people were interested in learning about and thinking. Here's the question. They're interested in thoughts about training their customers and supporting the multiple hybrid environments of the customers they teach. So what are your thoughts on how to do that?
Multiple. So I need to understand the question a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it needs a little clarification, but I think what we're getting at here is about training your customers that they teach. Since they're a learning organization, I think that's what it is. Fred, if you could help us out, maybe clarify so that we're understanding that question a little further.
So I mean, if you're offering training out to a range of different organizations, so those people are in different circumstances to your own, so you have perhaps less visibility, right, into those organizations. And I guess the learning experience that you provide has to be accommodating of a more of a wide range. So that might mean building some redundancy or multiple paths into the learning experience so people can take different approaches. It would mean more work to do, but it would be more personalized, if you like, to those individuals' needs as a result. I mean, I would argue that if you're skilled and at building a well-constructed, blended learning experience, then you're going to be using a wide range of learning activities, both synchronous, asynchronous, but you may have some redundancy in there for the synchronous elements to be also consumed asynchronously. So you can package those up. So that way it can be fully remotely consumed, but it would be a different type of experience for those people.
Does that?
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I was just about to ask Fred if that answered his question, because basically he followed up with, they have a variety of customers who have a broad spectrum of in-office, at-home, and hybrid. So if they have customers with these different locales, if you will, how do you make sure that you're handling everything for them and managing their hybrid environments to get that learning experience?
Well, I think that's where that redundant one approach is the redundancy approach. So you have multiple routes of completing the same outcome, reaching the same outcomes. Yes. The other aspect is, if you have that redundancy, by the way, and you have the right platforms in place and tools in place, then you can semi-automate how people see and engage with it, so that it feels much more personalized. It literally adapts to that individual person's circumstances. So I think that's is the way to go. It's getting easier to build those types of things. It's more sophisticated if you think about it, but it's certainly the right way to go in more cases than not. And, you know, I think Fred's point about them being customers with a spectrum of in-office, at-home and hybrid, well, that's probably true of a multinational. In fact, most large organizations will be in that type of situation. They'll have people in all of those environments, as I alluded to, or as that survey at the start that I showed you demonstrated. People will have different needs. You know, they might vote for two days a week in the office, or 1 day, or fully remote. But an organization should be prepared to support all of those if they're going to be inclusive and to benefit from the diversity of need and diversity of contribution that people can offer.
Yeah, thanks, Lars. I think that answered the question. Fred did say this is helpful. So
Great.
I think this is good. Another question just came in. How can you get these multiple audiences together in preparation to a training event? What kind of like pre-positioning tools and surveys do you suggest?
So that's interesting. I mean, there's a lot you could unpack in that in terms of
it is
assumptions and things around, you know. So what is the training event is my first question. So if it's an event as in you want people to be physically together, or, you know, so it's a synchronous thing, then you know, that's one thing. And if people are needing to prepare to come to that, then I think my answer is the same, to be honest. You know, if you go back to the principles of designing something that can be consumed and in multiple ways, i.e. fully remotely or together, and the experience might be a bit different, but one doesn't have to be completely better than the other, or one makes the other one fully redundant. It's about being inclusive. So let me try and answer the question a little bit more specifically. Multiple audiences together in preparation for a training event, pre-positioning tools. Well, one of the standard ways that I've done in the past is always to pre-diagnostic, you know, to understand individuals where they are. Where are they in this topic? How much do they know? What experience are they bringing? And if I can capture that beforehand, then obviously that influences what they should experience when they come to a particular event. Now, it might be that some people, you know, already know it, and they demonstrate they already know it. So why do they come? Or maybe when they come, you give them a particular role, which is as a coach and a mentor to support other people. So you leverage them in a different way, rather than sitting at the back, staring out the window and wondering why they're there, because they already know it. And then you've got another variant of that, of people who think they know it but don't really know it, and so that takes a different approach. But a lot of that is, I think, down to our ability to tease out where people are genuinely. And I think if you look at what I'm proposing, which is, if you're designing all of these things to consider, you know, the performance management aspect. So what does the manager think about people coming of their team coming on the training events? How are you engaging? How engaged are people in coming to it in the first place, if they're in the wrong mindset, or just culturally the organization is not helping people prepare for that appropriately, then you might find that the event doesn't achieve what you intended. Some of these variables are beyond your control, arguably, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to acknowledge them better than we do currently. If you just ignore them, then we may end up just wasting budget and people's time, and then we just fall into the same trap of some of these interventions or training. I'm using the phrase intervention. That's a negative term, really. That, you know, these training events are actually not supportive at all, and not helping the organization move forward, or the individuals either.
Thanks for that answer. Yeah, I think you brought up mindset. And so if you can get everyone into the right mindset before the training, I think you'll be on a good track. I do not see any other questions at this time. So Does anyone have any additional questions? We have Lars here is just to pick his brain, which is great. I'll see if there's anyone's coming in, but I don't see any. So why don't you continue?
Yeah, I'll continue. I'm just finishing up now, really. I did an open invitation, actually, for you to come into the Totara community. It's Totara.community. It is a place where we have 5,000, I think now, learning professionals interacting in there. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on Totara, but there's a lot of discussion around best practices in learning design and the approach that you need to take on a sector basis, in fact. So interesting place, I think, for you to come in. It's free to access. You just open an account, come on in, and join the debate. So I do an open invite there for anyone who's interested.
That's great, Lars. Thank you so much. I think that was a great presentation. I am not seeing any other kinds of questions coming in. So
thanks, Jace, for the feedback there. Thank you. If there's any further questions, just open invite also to reach out on LinkedIn, say, or get in touch at Totara. Be more than happy to answer specific questions at a later date.
That's wonderful, Lars. Thank you so much. And just as a reminder, we will be posting this recording and a PDF of these slides. So you'll get all that wonderful information, all the different charts and different things that Lars was talking about. And then with that, I'm going to go over and switch us back here. And I just want to thank Lars so much for how to support a hybrid workforce. I think we've learned a lot of different things, and it was great. It was sponsored by Totara, and there is that online community that is free, that is sharing best practices that Lars offered to you. So thanks so much, Lars, for your time. Thanks so much to Totara for sponsoring. And thank you so much to everyone here on the session for sharing your time with us. Have a good,
thank you.
Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much. See you sometime soon.
Bye-bye.